what's up everybody? I hope you're having a great day. My name is Jay and you're watching Clouded Reactions. So we just got done listening to the Killing Ground, track A of the Corollas Rex album by Sabaton. And it kind of made me think of like the song 1648 where they kind of did a bad thing morally. And so that's what this song kind of reminds me of. But at the same time, like I said in that video, they're saying that they're taking revenge. So I don't really see it as a bad thing. You could go both ways until I find out the history, which is what we're about to do now. But first of all, welcome to those who are new to the channel. And if you're not so new to the channel, welcome back.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this new episode of Sabaton History. My name is August Strindberg.
Och jag heter Hjalmar Branting. Toot, toot.
These guys are goofy, man. They're just like regular people. That's what's awesome.
Around the beginning of the 18th century, the Swedish Empire, under its king Karl XII, Charles XII, found itself at the height of its power. Swedish influence spread far beyond its own realm, and it began drawing most of Northern Europe into its political sphere. And as always, with great power came great responsibility. To the empire's south, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was increasingly succumbing to internal strife and destructive foreign influence. Without effective leadership, Poland was pretty much in constant political flux. The squabble of different aristocratic camps destabilized the kingdom ever closer to the point of anarchy. Swedish King Karl sought to put an end to this. He ousted the former regent, August II, and instead put his own candidate, Stanislav I, on the Polish throne. Karl hoped that with his backing, Stanislav would be able to not only stabilize the country, but also act as a useful political puppet to the Swedish kingdom. This was easier said than done. August, who not only wanted the Polish throne back, but was also the Elector of Saxony, did not take the ousting lightly. He got in contact with Tsar Peter I of Russia, who was busy challenging Swedish power in the Baltics. United by their animosity for Karl, they formed an anti-Swedish alliance. Then, at the head of a Russo-Saxon army, August occupied Warsaw in 1704, bringing Stanislav's usurpation to a halt. The agitated Polish people actually refused to fight for Stanislav, who had to flee the city and take refuge with the Swedes. Sighing heavily, Karl set his army to march, soon recapturing Warsaw. The Swedish army was known as the most formidable and professional military machine at the time in Europe, and had beaten the Saxons repeatedly in the field, even heavily outnumbered. But it did take months to secure the Polish throne. All the while, Peter's Russians were raiding Karl's possessions in the Baltics. It was not until the late autumn of 1705 when Karl finally found himself freed of Polish politics. With Stanislav's crown secured, he could now gather the bulk of the Swedish army and march against those pesky Russians. Although his advisors did point out that winter was not a good time for campaigning for obvious reasons, Karl just laughed in their faces. His soldiers had rested all summer long, so they might as well take to the field now. True to their king, the Swedish army set off, and for a while, the Swedish army disappeared from sight into the rough Lithuanian countryside. Marching through deep forests and treacherous swamps, the Swedish soldiers made a 180-mile-long journey in just 17 days. They surprised a large Russian force under General Ogilvy, who had set up camp in the fortress of Grodno, and who was not expecting such a march in winter. So at the beginning of January 1706, 20,000 Russian soldiers were trapped and besieged by Karl's army. For the next 2 months, the siege continued, and General Ogilvy's troops suffered dearly as their supplies dwindled. For Tsar Peter, this situation was cause for real panic, for this was not just a fortress garrison, but a whole army corps that was trapped in Grodno. If they were defeated, a full Swedish invasion would most certainly follow. Even worse, Peter's recent political reforms had made him many internal enemies among the Muscovites, who just seemed to be waiting for the opportunity to incite rebellion against his rule. So Peter urged his Saxon ally to break the siege with an attack from the west. August, who was not only known as the Strong, but also as someone who was extremely stubborn, was also keen on getting his revenge. Back in Poland, only a small Swedish token force of fewer than 10,000 men under the command of General Carl Gustav Reinhold had remained to keep their eyes on the Saxons. Knowing that his own forces would outnumber the small Swedish contingent by far, August planned to end Swedish influence over Poland once and for all with a single decisive stroke. So August not only began gathering 15,000 men himself, he also ordered his favorite general, Matthias Johann von der Schulenburg, to set his 20,000 men into motion as well. Reinhold, however, was no...
So you got 20,000 plus 15,000, so that's 35,000 against Swedish's 10,000? Okay. So I think in my other video when I said that a great victory and a great defeat, they're definitely talking about the great victory for Sweden and the great defeat for the Germans and the what's his name? August the Strong? Okay. I was thinking about morally, but this is okay.
Fool. He sensed the trap that was being set for him. Instead of waiting, Reinhold broke camp immediately. His strategy was simple. He could not hope to win against the combined numbers of his enemies, so he needed to deal with the two armies one at a time. Reinhold gathered his force, feigned his retreat, and Schulenburg took the bait. Without waiting for his liege, the Saxon general gave pursuit, sure of a quick victory. Near the town of Fraustadt, today's Psova in western Poland, he caught up with the Swedes. In the early morning hours of February 3rd, by the Swedish calendar, the two generals prepared for battle. Around 20,000 men under Schulenburg faced off against fewer than 10,000 Swedish soldiers. They stood apart on a 2-kilometer wide open field. In the midst of winter, the ground was frozen. A thick morning fog had descended. The field was broken by lots of small ditches and frozen streams, which made large formations difficult to maintain. Schulenburg placed his men in a long line, with barricades in front of infantry and artillery. The flanks were guarded by his cavalry. The Saxons clearly outnumbered and outgunned their enemies, fielding 37 artillery pieces while the Swedes had none. Schulenburg felt so sure of victory that he ecstatically rode up and down the lines, declaring that no quarter was to be given and no prisoner would be taken. He even sent envoys to Potsdam, urging the Prussian king not to harbor any Swedish refugees after the battle. But while the Swedes were amongst the most formidable soldiers...
Hey, so when I was editing this back, I actually skipped over this part. So I'm guessing this is the reason why that the Coralians maybe were mad. It was because this guy was pretty much saying, yo, I mean, this is a really big, larger army too. So he's saying that since he knows he's going to dominate these troops, he's like, yo, kill every single one, no prisoners. And even sent people, like messengers, to these other places saying, do not give these Swedes any quarter. Like, do not hide them. So, I mean, if I was a Swede, that would make me mad too. So maybe this was the reason why they went all gung-ho on them and just slaughtered all of them. I'm not really 100% sure. By the time this video comes out, you guys probably would have filled the first video with comments already.
Same could not be said about Schulenburg's force. Most of his soldiers were conscripts, some even French prisoners or Swiss mercenaries that had been pressed into his army. And the 7,000-strong Russian detachment on loan was of doubtful quality. General Reinhold placed his own troops into 4 groups. More than half of Reinhold's forces were highly mobile cavalrymen and dragoons, and he had them in squadrons on his flanks, while the center was to be dominated by the Swedish infantry. His plan was simple. Hit them first, hit them hard. At high noon, the Swedish formation surged forwards. While Reinhold's infantry moved up to meet the Saxon center, the Swedish cavalry circled around the flanks in a wide arc. On the Swedish left, the cavalry made such a quick advance that the Saxon horsemen panicked. Without firing a shot, the men turned and fled. On the right,
That is the clear difference between a well-trained army and conscripts. I don't know if this is right or not, so if you guys can correct me real quick. So the way he explained what a conscript was, is that the same as like a militia? Just like citizens picking up, not pitchforks, but like weapons, calling to arms. So they're not trained in shooting and stuff, but they're just given weaponry. Is that the same thing of a conscript, or is there a difference? Because if that's the same thing, then you can clearly see why 10,000 demolished 20,000. Demolished without a single shot fired. What are they just sitting there in awe? They have horses too, but they hit fast. Wow, let's keep listening.
Somewhat similar scene unfolded. Although the Swedish cavalrymen were slowed by the frozen streams, the Saxon cavalry only offered weak resistance, and after a few attacks, the Saxon left gave way and also turned. Smaller Swedish squadrons gave pursuit, but the rest turned and attacked the Saxons from the rear. In the meantime, the Swedish foot soldiers had closed in on the center and were taking the brunt of Saxon artillery and musket fire. Still, typical Swedish fashion, the men marched onwards, seemingly unfazed by fire and death. At the range of only 10 meters, the Swedish infantry unleashed a devastating volley into the enemy ranks. Then they drew their swords and crashed into the confused Saxon and Russian lines with steel. In furious close combat and threatened from all sides, the Saxon lines quickly collapsed. The French and Swiss auxiliaries...
I really like how they played Caroline's prayer before this. So they're in Caroline's prayer, they're explaining how the Caroleans just marched and fired, and the whole tactic switched. So now that way it kind of sets it up for how this battle went down, how the Caroleans were able to overpower them with that same tactic of just marching forward, and with a certain amount of meters distance, were able to fire accurately and destroy these soldiers. So I really like how, I'm glad that they really did that. Timeline wise, Caroline's prayer wasn't really a timeline. It was just more like explaining how the Carolingian army worked, how the tactic worked and everything. So I like how they did that before this. I like that.
Had already thrown down their arms and defected to the enemy. The Swedes had also captured and turned the enemy's own cannons against him. Faced with the choice of being cut down by cannonballs or cavalry sabers, the Saxons either surrendered or died where they stood. Only the Saxon guard defended itself until the afternoon. The main battle had lasted maybe half an hour and was a resounding victory for the outnumbered Swedes. They had captured large stores of guns and ammunition and destroyed Schulenberg's army nearly entirely. Contemporary sources claim that a lot of Russian prisoners were shot after the battle, but historians are still divided about the scale of the massacres. Tsar Peter, however, was quick to exploit the allegations for his own propaganda means to save his throne. Nonetheless, after Schulenberg's defeat, August himself faced a rebellion in his own aristocratic ranks. The Saxon noblemen forbade him to go on any more offensives against the Swedes and to disband the troops he had already gathered immediately. Karl, of course, was delighted to hear of Reinhold's victory and promptly awarded him the marshal's baton. And although General Ogilvy had escaped the siege of Grodno, Karl knew that his troubles in Poland were a thing of the past. Now it was time to deal with Peter and his ambitions before the Russian Empire had a chance to rise. Joachim, the interesting thing to me from the outside for this song is that it is about a Swedish victory when Sweden was a great power, but it's also not a song about Sweden being, we're the great guy, boy oh Sweden.
It's not a proud moment in Swedish history at all.
How do people perceive that? centuries later, like the murders, I guess is the only way to describe it.
It is, absolutely. Every country has, moments to be proud of and to be ashamed of in the past.
Sure.
And this is one of the moments we should be ashamed of. When we did the Polish-Swedish album, being a political minefield as it is, even talking about the Swedish Empire in those days.
Yeah. No,
For it was important for us to not only show, the good side of it.
And it's funny because there is a danger of that.
Yeah.
romanticizing. But you guys have been pretty good, like especially with the stories, even with Gotmetons and stuff. You have to talk about the. I wonder if they only put the track 1648 and this track only because of the pushback that they're receiving of making a album of Carolus Rex, and how people were saying, "Oh, if you make this album, I'm not gonna like you or not gonna listen to you no more," yada yada, etc. It's interesting that might have influenced the reasons as to why Sabaton added these two tracks. Because I thought they were doing it just because, this is our country, but, we also had our flaws. We should also show those flaws, which kind of, gave me some, I still respect them, but now the reasoning is changing as to why they put those tracks in. They're still good tracks. I really enjoyed them. But it's kind of altered my perception, I guess, as to why they put those tracks in the first place. I thought they were doing it just to show, like, hey, Sweden wasn't really that great. Calm down. They had a good run, but they hit some bumps on the way there. Now I might be figuring out that they did it just so that way they weren't going to receive as much pushback from the people who weren't not happy with them producing this Carolus Rex album. I mean, either way, even if that was the case, it made it for a great listen and a great history lesson, because 1648 was awesome. Dark sides of that, and just after this is Poltava, which we already covered.
Yep.
And that didn't go well mechanically, but this did go well mechanically.
Yeah, it's a victory for sure.
I mean, and no, it was a genius. It was a brilliant. The double enveloping movement was a brilliant tactical and strategic and operational victory. I mean, on every level, it was a fantastic victory. Except you guys were dicks.
Yeah, we were. We were at least trying to avoid falling into the trap of glorifying Sweden's role in these times.
Well, you can there are things to be glorified.
Oh, yeah.
And there are things that the way Sweden used, for example, musketry and musket infantry, that was unprecedented in the history of warfare. That was an absolute revolution that affected war for the next 250 years.
Gustavus Adolphus' use of light artillery.
See, these things, you can totally write songs about these and glorify. What I'm also impressed with now that we've done some 71, 72, 70-something episodes. You guys say you're just chroniclers, and you don't dig, as you say, so deep into the stories, but I think you dig a lot deeper than you realize, because you can just toss off things like that. Well, Gustav Adolphus' use of artillery, light artillery specifically,
yeah.
Light artillery for what? Most, rock stars don't throw things off like that as like, Sweden, Gustav Adolphus, I say Gustav Adolphus.
You were lucky, we read about, basically 100 years of Swedish history.
Yeah, those were one of the big points. I am genuinely
Interested in military history.
Sure.
So a few things are bound to stick with me.
Yeah.
But to be honest, though, it's scary. We're looking now. So when we're recording this is June 2020.
Yeah.
And it's not even a year ago since we released the Great War album, right?
That's true.
And I've already forgotten so much of the research we've done.
If you were you could probably dig up. You'll notice that when people ask me stuff about writing the whole Great War show. Can you do a talk about this? I'm like, I'm not gonna. And then you start talking, and then it just comes. It
comes back.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Because for me, it's I feel like I've forgotten about as much as I learned. Like the hard drive is full of something.
But that's important. Because remember what they say. They say if you want to learn something, don't read a book about it. Write a concept album about it.
Oh yeah, that helps.
That's what they say. But you know what they did not say?
They did not say why we have a Polish thing behind us. Why is that Polish there?
Well, Killing Ground is about the battle in Fraustadt, which is modern day Wyszynów, I think it's pronounced. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but it is in modern day Poland.
So, because I never think of Saxony as being Upper Saxony as being Poland, but I was mistaken. It is actually in Poland.
Yeah.
It was Joachim that said we need this and we need the Swedish flag in it as well to actually show both of this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this battle, Fraustadt, has nothing to do with the Warsaw Uprising, but it does have something to do with Poland, so we thought we'd leave it in.
Once again, I'm Cornelis Vreeswijk.
And I am Astrid Lindgren.
And really? Wow, I love what you've done with your hair.
Oh, thanks.
And we're, well, I'm dead and all. But this was Sabaton History.
See you next week. All right. You know what's coming now. It's me asking you for money. So, money, give me all your money.
But now I do know that, Sweden kicked their butts. Not only that, Peter the Great, they made him stand down and disbanded the army that he had already raised, telling them, don't attack these Swedes, guys, right? They only got 10K troops, and they're able to do the damage that they did. We don't want to poke them and bring them over here and attack us on our land. So wow, I actually gotta get out of here. But that was actually interesting. I don't see it. They're saying it's a bad thing, but if I could just understand the reasoning as to why they did that, if they just did it just to show kind of like a fear standpoint, kind of like intimidation, we just killed this huge army and we killed the prisoners. We're not someone to mess with. Then that's probably something to look down upon. But I think it really depends on the reasoning as to why they did it. It still would be shunned upon even if they're getting revenge. But I mean, during a war, feelings are amped. Everyone's hype. Everyone's on edge. It's not. I wouldn't put it over their head, hang it over their head. But yeah, let me know if anything that I missed. Like and comment. Subscribe only if you want to. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.